Records. That's a good sign. Here's the guy with the big orange gloves again, who wants to tell you something about another Gamo rifle. Yeah, this time I unfortunately messed up a bit. Great rifle, but... right? Let's start from the purely technical side. This is a Gamo 600. You know, I've already made 2 videos about a Gamo 300. This is the big brother of that. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to figure out exactly when it's from. It must be after 1970, you know. Everything I have here usually has an F mark, and therefore from after 1970. It could be, so to speak, but it could just as well be that this is the big brother from the earlier years. It's really hard to say. Also here, if I manage to find it out later, I'll add it in the comments, because I'm the type to follow up. 1,000, I would say. Let's start with that. I'll show you the whole thing. Oh, come on, I'm just going to chat your ears off for a bit. First of all, what's always important is a prism rail on top. As you can see, today I didn't put a scope on it, even though I could have, because you also don't see a target with holes, which I usually present. And you also don't see a laptop with speed readings, because when shooting, the group of hits was wandering all over the place, until I realized that the screws of the scope had come loose. And after I tightened it, everything was fine again. But it doesn't matter, right? Anyway, I was already a bit out of sorts, and then realized that something was off with it. Whatever. I'm going to read to you now what it says here. It says Model 600. That's surprising. Hold on. Hello! I know! You only ever see my beard, but that's part of the program for this channel. Well, at least for this format here. There's a serial number here. That wouldn't have been a surprising 6-digit number, right? While the model and the Expomatic all had, I think, 5-digit numbers and a letter code, some in caliber 4.5. That doesn't surprise anyone anymore. On top, it says elgamo. I already mentioned it in the other video. Elgamo changed its name to Gamo sometime, at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. So it's the same company, it just had a different name before. Today it's called Gamo Outdoor. You have to mention that specifically. Normally you only hear Gamo made in Spain, not China made in Spain. That's still around. That's also important with Gamo. Gamo also produced some items in Brazil at the same time, and the Spanish stuff is more sought after. An 11mm dovetail rail, no markings at all. Very interesting. I don't know if the camera is picking it up again, but here's a band. It looks like there's some copper involved. Is the camera picking that up? Yeah, it's working. So really, really strange. I have no idea what that is. Overall, the condition is excellent. There's practically no scratch on the wood, and not a single rust spot on the system. Everything is complete, so it's basically a real treat. Yeah, and that's why it annoys me even more that there are now internal issues, which I'll get to in a moment. We have a plastic butt cap at the back, which isn't labeled with elgamo, but just has some kind of target on it. We have a cheek piece on the right side, so for right-handed shooters, of course, it's on the left side. We have a relatively long compression piston. That doesn't really mean much. So, with rifles that are 40 or 50 years old, you're actually completely satisfied with 5 or 6 joules. Then we have a brake barrel. No, this will surprise you. Brake barrels basically all look the same. Of course, there are nuances in the differences, but it doesn't matter. We have a front sight tunnel and 1 gram. That could easily come from the regular Gamo spare parts box. Yeah, you're just a camera, so I can hold the barrel right in front of your face. Let's take a quick look from underneath. The trigger guard is the typical Gamo trigger guard. I think you can recognize all the early gamers by that. There are 2 screws here. 1 screw. The back of the trigger adjusts the length of the pull. So you can really adjust the trigger pull from very long to super short. That's great. And here, through the small hole, as always with the Gamo rifles, is the trigger weight. That means you can set it up so that you have a slight pre-travel, and then at some point, the trigger point, the pressure point, comes in super dry, just like with these shotguns. We have 2 screws at the front and 1 screw at the back. With others, it's done differently, but it doesn't really matter. So the sights. Take a look at this rear sight. Isn't that a poem? Just look at the effort that went into making this piece of metal. And yes, it's all still metal. It's called micrometer sighting. Everything clicks, everything's nice, everything's beautiful. That's why I love old shotguns, as long as they work. Rooftop sight, so it can last for 50 years. I just held the camera for a moment, Not a rooftop beam site, of course, but there's a roof over it like a bead tunnel. Yes, now let's get to the crux of the matter. You've probably noticed that people like him, Gandhi and others, always seem to hold it like this, pulling it back, and then holding it with one hand while they stuff the pellet in with the other. And for the very, very, very first time in my over 60 years, it actually happened that the thing snapped back. It wanted to bite me, and that happened during the shooting. I must have fired 50 shots, 60 shots, while zeroing in and testing. And that happened a total of 4 or 5 times, and once like this. That means I really can't sell this thing any further. So if it has to be, it'll be with a high loss, but I'll always try to repair it. I've narrowed down the problem a bit. Unfortunately, I have to get into the guts of the trigger mechanism. So it's not the catch blade down here that's somehow messed up, but it's really in the trigger. That's it for today. That's actually the rusty nail I got stuck back then. One of the springs is probably just weak, not pushing the catch blade far enough. I don't want to have to look at it anymore. A new seal will probably be due as well. I'd rather have it firmly here so nothing suddenly snaps up. So it still works, but new seal is needed. Everything is affordable and doable. Now I'm already doing it like this. I'm so used to it that whenever I cock an air rifle, it stays that way. And that was quite a shocking experience for me, that I suddenly have to watch out for my fingers. And that's why I'm doing everything very carefully. So in the pellet trap, preferred setting is super soft. Really, really soft. Relatively long, because that's how I've set it up. Then comes a featherlight, super noticeable trigger point. So just as nice as it is. Great trigger. A fantastic rifle. In excellent condition. Unfortunately, it's broken. So, once I've repaired this thing, I'm thinking about whether it stays in my collection or if I sell it again at eGang, because it's a really nice piece. I will definitely provide a proper shot group later on when the time comes. So far, I can't say much about it, and I don't know when it was made, but at least I know where it comes from. Yeah, it's a shame, but there's nothing that can be done. I was really annoyed. I can't really tell the previous owner, yeah, here's the warranty, blah blah blah, because that might not be the case. I mean, I've shot about 50 or 60 rounds, and 55 of them were completely fine. 2001. Most of the time there's something mentioned like from an estate or barn find or whatever, and if someone has lost a relative, then you can also come up with some details about that, you know. But I can handle everything, and then we'll see. So, then I would say I have more to share about that. I think that's it, a complicated story, but at least then I thank you all once again very much, and wish you that the same happens to you as it did to me. That's just good stuff. Is the man who has to turn off his camera every time all by himself, without any staff, without a crew, without minions. Luckily now sitting down